Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, August the 21st, 2025. On Monday we had this famous meeting between European leaders and Trump, and of course these European leaders were there to support the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, on his trip to Washington, and I thought it would be a good idea to look at the astrology of this meeting. For example, we can look at the chart for when these European leaders, 7 of them, I think, met Donald Trump. And there are some other charts we can look at. For example, we can look at the collective chart of these 7 European leaders. I thought that was an interesting idea, and I'm kind of playing with astrology here. And I thought you might be interested in it. I'm not saying that it's a system that necessarily works, but it certainly gives us a different perspective. But before I talk about this meeting, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, August the 21st, 2025. So here is the chart for today. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. That's the thumbnail, top right. There was a group photograph of these 7 European leaders. I think you had 5 prime ministers and presidents, and then you had the sort of head of NATO, and you had the General Secretary of NATO and the President of the European Commission, and then of course you had Trump and you had Zelensky. So that's where that picture came from. So as far as the chart of today is concerned, set for New York at noon, we have the moon now in a Leo. So at noon, New York time, the moon is at 9 degrees 24 Leo, making a conjunction to Mercury. And so London time, the moon moves into Leo at 0 degrees 17. In other words, 17 minutes past midnight. 17 minutes past midnight, or which would be sort of 17 minutes past 1 in sort of, for example, Paris or Rome. And so for most of us, it is going to be a Leo day. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon won't move into Leo until probably late morning. So moon makes a trine to Saturn, makes a sextile to Uranus, makes a trine to Neptune, makes an opposition to Pluto, sextile to Mars, then it makes that conjunction to Mercury. So the moon is making a load of aspects today, and you can sort of take your pick about what you want to emphasize. I think that the moon conjunct Mercury is probably the most interesting. It is a conjunction. We do have the 2 communication planets connected to one another. So moon, is how we communicate on a more emotional level. Mercury is more about the verbal side of communication, and what's going through our brains, whereas the moon is perhaps more about the heart. And so with moon conjunct Mercury, that does suggest to me that we should be able to express ourselves pretty well, and if we've got something to say, now might be a chance to say it, because our mind and our heart will be at one with each other. And also, of course, Mercury is now retrograde, so that looks pretty good. Now, sort of earlier in the day, we have the moon making a trine to Saturn, trine to Neptune. So moon in Leo, trine Saturn in Aries. So that's not a bad aspect. It sort of helps stabilize things. And moon in Leo is perhaps not as crazy as the moon in the other 2 fire signs, Sagittarius or Aries. Moon in Leo. Well, the moon is in a fixed sign, and with the moon in that sign, we like things to be done according to a particular plan, provided we're getting enough attention. Attention is important with moon in Leo, and perhaps that moon conjunct Mercury says that we we want to be noticed, we want to be appreciated, and perhaps Moon Mercury conjunction might be tempted to boast, to discuss, its achievements, your achievements, our achievements, and you're wanting some praise. That's always important. And so if you can take advantage of this situation, well, you might just praise someone, say something nice to them. It would help if you really genuinely meant it, but even if you don't mean it, it can make someone feel good about themselves. So yeah, a lot of lunar aspects, and we've got the Sun at 28 degrees Leo, almost 29 degrees Leo. So the Sun really is getting ready to move into Virgo. I think it's sort of tomorrow, Friday, it moves into Virgo. I don't know sort of what time. I think it's, so if on the 22nd, it moves into Virgo, well, sort of around 9:30, 9:34 p.m. London time. That's in the evening. So, okay, it won't move into Virgo until Saturday if you're in Australia or New Zealand or most of Asia. But, it's getting there. And the Sun is getting closer and closer to Regulus. So yesterday in my video for Wednesday, I talked about the Sun being close to Regulus. Well, today it's even closer. And, the Sun is, the royal star. It's a very dramatic energy. And when you're thinking about Regulus, you're talking about rapid rises, but also rapid falls. We can fall from grace. So it's important not to be complacent, but probably we should focus on the positive here. We shouldn't worry too much about the negative side of things, though we mustn't be too arrogant or boastful, because that might backfire. We don't want that to happen. Now, as far as the essential dignities are concerned, I mentioned that the end of Leo is in the face and the term of Mars. So the face and the term are these minor dignities. They're not as important as triplicities or exaltations or sign rulership, but there is a Mars influence here. So the Sun in late Leo can be quite fiery, and can be sort of quite keen to express its opinion, and recognition does matter. And so overall, Sun in Regulus, as you move to the end of a working week, perhaps there are things you can take advantage of, perhaps even people you can take advantage of. And, don't be afraid of getting in touch with people who are influential, important. They may not be royalty, but, in a relative sense, they could be. They could have the power to help you in terms of, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And so that's the picture for New York, for the Americas in general. And if we turn to Australasia, setting a chart up for Sydney, it's as I said, the moon is earlier in the sign, and so you can see at noon Sydney, the moon is at 1 degree 32 Leo. So that morning the moon would have moved into Leo, and if you're in New Zealand, I think even more so, the morning might be a sort of moon in Cancer time. And so perhaps if you're in Australasia, it could take a bit of time for the day to really get going, but once the moon does move into Leo, you'll see the change. And I'm not saying it's going to be a bad change. I mean, the first thing that happens when the moon moves into Leo, I think, is that it makes a trine to a Saturn, which is, it's a very stabilizing energy. And then there is the heliocentric view. So here it is, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. And that means we can have a look at Earth and what Earth is doing. So there is Earth at 28 degrees 51 Aquarius, because in the heliocentric chart, the Earth is always exactly opposition the Sun. So the Sun is in late Leo, therefore the Earth is going to be in late Aquarius. And the Earth is making a square to Uranus. And there it is. And so this kind of mirrors what we've got geocentrically, because geocentrically we've got the Sun about to move into Virgo, where it will make a square to Uranus. So we've got Sun square Uranus, and we've also got Earth square Uranus. Now that Sun square Uranus, I think that takes place over the weekend, but this Earth square Uranus takes place today on Thursday, I think, or perhaps even late on Wednesday, around sort of midweek, but it's pretty close today, Thursday, this Earth square Uranus. And Earth square Uranus could be quite a dramatic aspect, wanting to make an impact, wanting to create waves, and things might happen. And it's because perhaps people are in a hurry, they want action, and things aren't happening. They're going to want to sort of just move things along, whatever it takes, and people just might be dramatic, almost for the sake of it. But don't expect everything to go to plan. Especially on a broader collective level, not necessarily at the level of the individual, but people are trying to get things together globally. People who have power and influence, and it just may be the case that things just might not quite work out as expected. So I think that Earth square Uranus aspect is certainly the main aspect to be watching for. We do have Venus trine Pluto. That Venus trine Pluto was exact yesterday, so it is losing some of its power. But Pluto is configured not just by Venus but also by Mars. So we've got Mars square Pluto, we've got Venus trine Pluto. So Pluto is playing a role, and it is perhaps about who controls who and where the power lies. I mean, Venus trine Pluto is more subtle than Mars square Pluto. Venus trine Pluto might be about subtle manipulations, trying to work with the people you get in touch with, trying to give off particular vibes, particular impressions, and also Venus trine Pluto does have a possessive streak. It wants to own. It wants a sense of belonging, and it doesn't want people to go too far. And then Mars square Pluto is more of a straight power play. Who has the power, who doesn't have the power, and if we don't have enough power, what are we going to do about it? And I think that's about it. Those are the main things going on heliocentrically. So let me now turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, August the 21st, 2025. Aries. Aries, I do think that things are improving for you. The moon is now moving into Leo. I mean, very much moving into Leo, and it makes a load of aspects in Leo, and it does make a sextile to Mars, which is your ruler. That's one of the aspects it makes, and there's a big difference now here, because the moon was in Cancer, and while the moon was in Cancer, Aries, you might have felt that you just weren't ready for anything in particular. You just wanted to keep a fairly low profile. You valued your privacy, and you perhaps were quite defensive. And with the moon changing sign, moving into Leo, moving into a fire sign, you're feeling better. You feel more in control, and you feel more confident, and you're starting to see ways of enjoying yourself. But in a process, you can exercise a certain amount of responsibility. After all, the moon in Leo is making a trine to Saturn in Aries. So Saturn allows you to control yourself. There is some self-discipline there, and you're not going to allow things to get out of hand. So you can stabilize the situation, and at the same time you'll realize that once everything is in order, under control, then you can start doing things your way, and then it won't be long before you can really start to enjoy yourself. And when the moon makes a conjunction to Mercury, as it does, it will also make a sextile to Mars. So a few days ago I was talking about this Mercury-Mars sextile, which was, I think, very important for you. I think this Mercury-Mars sextile was allowing you to tell everyone how you felt. You could look after your own interests. You could be a very effective communicator. And that Mercury-Mars sextile was starting to separate. But then the moon comes along and brings it back into focus. And moon conjunct Mercury, whatever it is you want to talk about, you want to tell people about, you very much can do it. And you can do it in a way that is very persuasive. And if you enjoy something, then you can perhaps show other people that they can enjoy it as well. And you don't have to make any changes. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to worry too much about other people's particular view of the world or other people's sensitivities. You can just be yourself. And if you can, be yourself, then, everything else should work. Though, there do have to be some limits. I'm not saying you can do whatever you like. One thing, Aries, where you might be a bit fuzzy, a bit confused about is the limits of the law, or the limits of regulations, not necessarily law as in terms of criminality, for example, but there are always codes and restrictions. There may be local codes, local restrictions, and you might be unsure about them. And so if you just assume that everything's going to be okay in a sort of a legal sense, or just in a contractual sense as well, then don't make that assumption. Do check, because there's just some possibility that Aries might just regard themselves as being above laws, codes and regulations, and you might then be in for an unpleasant surprise. But it would all be unnecessary. So if you're not sure about whether you can do something in a legal sense, then just ask, do a bit of research, and then everything will be fine. But it shouldn't spoil your day if you just exercise a certain amount of responsibility. And with these planets in Leo, because now there are sort of 3 planets in Leo. We've got Moon, Mercury, and Sun in Leo, and we've got the Moon making the sextile to Mars. I think that does allow you to be an exciting person, and does allow you to transmit that excitement to other people. And as a result, you may find that the net effect is that you actually become quite attractive, and people gravitate towards you because you may be the person of the moment. Taurus, you might be of a view that you should be slowing down. You don't have to take everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I know that there was a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, which I hope you made the most of it. And that this conjunction between the Venus and Jupiter, well, it's nearly 10 degrees apart, so it is starting to lose some of its power. I don't know how you felt about that Venus conjunct Jupiter. I mean, to be honest, I've got Taurus rising, and so it could be argued that Venus-Jupiter conjunction should have helped me. I didn't think it was great. I have not enjoyed Venus conjunct Jupiter. Maybe that's just me. I mean, maybe because I just have a negative view, but I've in some respects found it quite frustrating and almost quite worrying, this Venus conjunct Jupiter. But maybe that's just me, and maybe it just doesn't work, or maybe I should have been looking at Venus Jupiter from a perspective of my sun sign, because obviously I'm a sun in Gemini. But in theory, that Venus and Jupiter conjunction should have been great for me, but I didn't enjoy it, that Venus Jupiter conjunction. I mean, I can see it in a sort of from a larger perspective, which I don't really want to go into. Maybe it reflects some more sort of long-term change, but short-term, I thought it was not just a damp squib, but there were aspects of this Venus Jupiter conjunction which I actually found quite worrying. But that's just me, and I don't want to project. And in theory, this Venus Jupiter conjunction should have been great. And it's still 10 degrees apart, and so the conjunction is still in operation. And I do hope that you were able to take advantage of it, but you're still able to take advantage of it. For example, having a positive view of the world, being able to communicate this, and having just a natural ability to get people to listen to you and understand what you're saying. And now, though, the moon is was in Cancer. It's now moving into Leo, and with the moon moving into Leo, things are starting to slow down. And the moon is in a fixed sign. You're a fixed sign, and perhaps you need time to recuperate or to adjust. And you might additionally feel that where you are needed, it might be in your own home. Maybe you just want to spend time in your own home. There are now 3 planets in Leo: Moon, Mercury, and the Sun. And in the Taurus chart, the sign Leo is pretty low profile, and that just may be where you're being drawn, and that is absolutely okay. You don't have to do anything. There's no obligation here. And at the same time, when you are somewhere safe with this conjunction between the moon and Mercury, you're able to think straight. And it's important to be able to think straight. You'll be able to work things through, and you'll be able to get the balance right between thinking and feeling. And somehow your feelings and your thoughts will just complement one another. And if you are talking, your style of communication is going to change. I think that you're perhaps going to be sort of more balanced, and you're still going to be able to be very sensitive with this moon conjunct Mercury, though maybe you're going to be more particular. Leo, it's not just that it's a fixed sign, it's quite a sign that is quite proud, and so the way you speak will be about you and what you are about. And if people don't understand you, then they may not give you the respect you feel you deserve. So that is a good reason why you should stick to what you know and what you trust. If you hang out with people you don't know very well, they just won't understand. So you really do try to focus on yourself and the things you understand, but you can still get your message across, and you can show yourself to be really quite sort of passionate about certain things. The things that you regard as being important, perhaps the things you regard as being worth fighting for. Gemini. Today, Gemini, there is a conjunction between the moon and Mercury, and this moon Mercury conjunction looks pretty good to me. It's in Leo, and the moon gives you a sensitivity that perhaps in the recent past you might have felt that you were missing. You were perhaps talking a lot, speculating a lot, but there wasn't an emotional foundation for what you were talking about. It wasn't real. It was just speculation, a lot of ideas. Your mind just going off on a tangent. But now with the moon making a conjunction to Mercury, Gemini, you can be sort of more real, and you can start to concentrate on the things that matter, not just to you, but also to other people. And so there can be something about you that comes over as being quite heartfelt, and that sincerity can win you friends and get you support. Are you sincere? Well, Gemini, you're always sincere up to a point, aren't you? But there's a temptation to sort of drift off, to think about something else, and you're talking about one thing and your brain is thinking about something else. So you're not necessarily quite as sincere as you appear to be, but does that matter? The important thing is to create the right image, and also to make sure that you have some control over the subject matter. And subject matter does matter, because right now Geminis are capable of being quite negative. Negative to the point of being quite dark. You're able to think about things which may not be very nice, which are connected with the less pleasant side of life, and you're being real. You're being absolutely realistic here. I mean, you're seeing stuff that other people maybe they can't see, maybe they don't want to see, maybe they're looking the other way, but it's there. And perhaps, Gemini, you feel that you need to discuss it, and you have to ask, is this the right thing to do? Who are you dealing with? And so a bit of filtering might be a good idea. Yeah, sure, you're good at talking, you're a Gemini, but sometimes the subject matter might be inappropriate. Unless you're dealing with people who know you well and you're on the same wavelength with them, and they understand your interests, and you feel that you can be honest with them. So Gemini, a certain amount of discretion might be in order. Although if you do need to deal with difficult subjects, and if you feel that it really is important, then I think you can. You'll know what to say, and as I've already said, I think that you are quite sensitive at the moment, and sometimes certain things you do have to be talked about, and Gemini in a way can be the mouth. They can be the person who talks. There are things that other people can't talk about, but Gemini can be the mouth, and you can be cast in that role. I mean, from a sort of perspective of sort of group therapy, I know that there are sort of theories about group therapy, that there is, I don't know if you've ever been in group therapy, but with group therapy, different members of a group get given particular roles. I mean, it's a natural process, it's an organic process. One person can be the heart of the group, another person can be the anger of the group, but another person can just be the mouth of the group. They say what everyone is thinking, but can't say. And so that might be your role. And if other people are having difficult and dark thoughts, you might be the one that articulates them, and you might be doing the right thing. Cancer. The moon has now changed signs. It's out of Cancer, and so a lot of the major Cancer emphasis, is starting to sort of die down. We still have a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, but that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is nearly 10 degrees apart. I mean, that's getting a bit marginal, but still, you've got Venus and Jupiter in your sign. There's nothing to complain about. Venus and Jupiter are the benefics, and do take advantage of it. And Venus is not going to be in Cancer forever. At a certain stage, it will move into Leo. I mean, to be more precise, Venus moves into Leo on the 25th, which is the 25th. That is what day of the week is the 25th? I should know. It's a Monday. So on Monday, Venus moves into Leo, and so on from then on, you'll only have Jupiter in Cancer. But don't worry, you'll have Jupiter in Cancer until June of next year. So do take advantage of Venus and Jupiter in your sign, while they're still there, and so maybe that's something you can sort of work on for the rest of a week. And so the Moon has changed signs. It's moved into Leo, and the Moon's probably its most important aspect is a conjunction with Mercury, and this conjunction with Mercury does put an emphasis on your mind and what you are trying to say. And so if you have thoughts and feelings, you might want to tell people about them in your own particular way. You may not make it completely obvious, and you might want to signal it, and not everyone will understand what you're trying to say, but you will expect to be understood. And the Moon in Leo does have a relatively high opinion of itself, and you demand a certain amount of respect, and you shouldn't allow yourself to be upset if you don't immediately get the respect you feel you deserve. It's there, but it might not be as obvious as you'd like it to be. But with Moon conjunct Mercury, you have the ability to say things which get people's attention, and you can sort of inject a certain sense of drama into your speech, and if you can be dramatic, then there's a good chance that people will pay attention to you, and they'll listen to what you say, and the chances are they'll do what you say as well. But don't be too boastful, don't be arrogant. It's unnecessary to be arrogant. It's you just have to just accept that different people are going to respond to you in different ways, and there's no need to talk up yourself too much. I don't think that's necessary. And another aspect the Moon makes is that once when it moves into Leo, it makes a trine to Saturn, and this trine between the Moon and Saturn is, I think, pretty fortunate in a number of different ways. One way the Moon-Saturn trine is useful is that it can help you be successful. It can help you ground things and make things just easier to deal with. So if you're confronted with a confusing situation, for example, at work, then you'll know what to do. You'll know how to stabilize things, and you can be something of an authority figure, and people will respect you. And if there are particular things which need to be dealt with, you can ensure that they are dealt with quickly, and that particularly applies to anything that is of a financial nature. I think you're going to be quite good with money today, and you're going to be helped by that conjunction between the Moon and Mercury. You'll just understand the way money works, as many Cancerians do. I mean, don't forget that some Cancerians are just fantastically successful. Elon Musk, whatever you think of Elon Musk, they just have a good sense of how money works. And Cancers in general, you don't have to be Elon Musk. I mean, Cancer is a security orientated sign. It knows what matters, and that Moon conjunct Mercury does allow you to work on money matters and make sure that everything's in order. The Moon trine Saturn might also be about relationships and not just getting on well with people, but making sure you have common interest. And that's perhaps important. This moon trine Saturn is, I wouldn't have said an especially emotional trine, but it is very focused on the things that matter, and it can create connections between you and another person, based on shared interest. Leo, things are happening in your sign. We now have 3 planets in Leo. We've got Moon in Leo, Mercury in Leo, Sun in Leo, and we have the build-up to the new moon. And this is quite an interesting one, because we have got the moon in Leo and we've got the sun in Leo, so we would think that we're heading for a Leo new moon. But of course we're not heading towards a Leo new moon, because the sun is right at the end of Leo. It's about to move into Virgo, and the new moon I think it's on Saturday, is in Virgo. So although it seems to be moving towards a Leo new moon, it's actually heading to a Virgo new moon, and that's possibly something that you need to work with. You might be of a view that things are moving in one direction, that they're converging on a point, and it seems to you quite clear where that point is. But when you actually arrive at that point could have shifted. It could have moved somewhere else. So if you're thinking about something new, some new venture, something you're ready for, then that's good. But by the time that venture starts, the situation might have changed, and there might be other things that you have to take into consideration. But you don't have to worry about it right now, because so tomorrow and a day after, I'll be talking about this new moon, in greater detail. But as far as today is concerned, just enjoy the fact that the Sun, Mercury, and the Moon are in Leo, are in your sign. That gives you a lot of power, and it gives you a real sense of yourself and what you are able to achieve. And additionally, the Sun, your ruler, is moving towards Regulus. I mean, it's what, 28:51 Leo, pretty much 29 Leo. Regulus is at, I think at the moment it's about 0 degrees 11 Virgo. So getting really close to Regulus. Regulus is the royal star. It's a fortunate influence, and you're already feeling it. So this is perhaps a time of year when Leos can be successful, when they can really push forward, where they can make waves, if you give yourself the chance. Of course, in the northern hemisphere, people can be distracted because it's August, but no reason to be distracted. Do take advantage of everything, because things do look good, but maybe you should keep your own counsel. Don't feel that you have to spend too much time listening to other people, because if you do spend too much time listening to other people, you might find that your overall impact is weakened. I'm not convinced that close relationships are going to be especially helpful, simply because you won't know what's going on, and it'll be difficult to know what another person's motives are, and you won't know what's going on in their mind. And you can try to understand, and you're just not going to get there. And so it might be better if you make all the important decisions, and if you don't allow yourself to be persuaded or indeed confused by what another person is saying, and what matters is what you say and what you're thinking about. There is a conjunction between the Moon and Mercury in Leo at the moment. It's a great conjunction. It's about your heart and mind being at one with one another, and if you feel something, you can say it, and okay, even if you don't want to say anything, you can think it, and your feelings and your thoughts, they do understand one another. And so that means that if you're left to your own devices, if you're not being confused by another person, then it's going to be easy for you to understand what is happening. And so you can put yourself in a pretty strong position. And if you do need to communicate, I would suggest that it should be a fairly one-way process. It's perhaps about you saying what you believe, and if you spend too much time listening to what other people are saying, then you might get confused. So normally we always say, don't we? It's always good to listen. It's always good to talk. If you talk, you've got to be able to listen. You've got to get the balance right. But that's not always true. Sometimes it's best to just do the talking. And you might seem slightly arrogant. I mean, that's to be expected, with 3 planets in Leo. You might be full of yourself. It's okay to be full of yourself. And it's okay to really believe in things and not to show any doubt. Again, that's something that we're told that we shouldn't show doubt. Doubt is not popular in society at the moment. People who have doubt, they lose credibility. People want conviction, and so today, as far as possible, Leo, even if you have your own private doubts, I think you should try to show conviction, because I think people will be very impressed by it. Virgo, we have the Moon moving into Leo. We have a lot of planets in Leo. We've got Sun, Mercury, and the Moon in Leo, and of course, Leo is the sign which is before Virgo, and it can be a sign which is rather low profile. There are things you don't necessarily want to reveal, things that you maybe want to keep to yourself, and that is absolutely okay. If you were to tell people what was on your mind and just be ridiculously open, I think there would be cause for regret. So Leo, if you are of an introverted nature, or if you just feel temporarily rather introverted, then that's the way to be. And all the while, your mind is working away. There is today this conjunction between the Moon and Mercury. Mercury is your ruler, and so with the Moon conjunct Mercury, I think that means that your brain is on good form. And one reason that your brain is on good form is because you're able to listen to your feelings as well. So you can bring your thoughts and your feelings together, and this should inform you. It should give you some idea about what the right approach is, and it just gives you a good understanding of what's happening, and you are certainly able to articulate it. You just have a natural way with words. But does anyone need to know about it? I don't think that you need to give speeches today, because today there is something rather retiring about you. So you might sort of prepare what you're going to say, or you might just use today as a good opportunity to sort some of your ideas out, and also to work with some of your negativity. A negative streak is coming to the fore, and it may not be such a bad thing. I don't think that you're worried about having negative thoughts. And you can be quite morbid today, and you can think about all the things that could go wrong. And if you have the opportunity, you might even want to spend time walking through a graveyard. The concept of death in a theoretical way, it's not that death is with you. It's not that you have to be worried about dying or anything like that. It's just that there's a natural understanding of the process of decay, and you can see decay around you. And that might be another good reason why you don't want to talk too much, because if you were to talk too much and you were to give people your insights, they might not appreciate them, because you might come over as being too morbid, or perhaps just focusing on the negative, focusing on endings rather than beginnings. And people like to be positive, don't they? And positivity is, it is a problem. It can be quite annoying if people are just positive for no reason at all. And Virgo, you can see how bad things can be, sure, but it doesn't necessarily affect you. And you might, in theory, like to talk about it, but just some people just might not be prepared to listen, or it's just not what they want to hear. And your ability to focus on the negative, could be an advantage. It gives you an ability to be different, to be separate from the pack, and perhaps to anticipate the future. And if you can see that something might go wrong in the future, then maybe that will give you an advantage. But what you mustn't do is just get into a spiral of negativity. Just a few Virgos might. They might just think, well, there's no point. You're too focused on yourself. And that can be the downside of being introspective. It can be the downside of keeping yourself to yourself. So whatever you're doing, Virgo, it's important that you have something to work on, something to get your teeth into, something that you know is important. And that can happen, especially as the moon is conjunct Mercury. So it's not enough to just have thoughts and ideas. Do something with them. Do some preparation. Work on your ideas. Write them down. You don't have to tell other people what you're doing, but you can still be, writing notes, preparing your next move, and perhaps getting ready for the new lunar cycle, because we've got a new moon coming up on Saturday, and it's a Virgo new moon. And for you, I think that it can be great. It can be a really good start to the autumn. Well, if you're in the northern hemisphere, it feels like autumn here. Actually, I do get real autumn vibes here, even though it's sort of mid-August. But maybe if you're in the northern hemisphere, maybe you're getting autumn vibes too. But the next few weeks, after the new moon, things should be good for you. Of course, I understand if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're not getting autumn vibes. I do get that. You're getting a completely different set of seasonal vibes. Libra. Don't forget that Venus is now moving through the last 5 degrees of Cancer. So, Cancer, is a great place for Venus to be, especially when Jupiter is in Cancer as well. So, do take advantage of Venus being in Cancer. I think it leaves Cancer on Monday. So last half of the week, Thursday, Friday, the weekend, what are you going to do? And, Venus in Cancer can be about you really projecting yourself, being popular, getting people's attention. And whatever it is that you want, Libra, now is a great time to get it, to use your charms and your charisma, and at the same time you're going to be very persuasive. You have been persuasive for some time, and you will have a way with words. You know how to argue your case. So if it's a situation where you want something and other people disagree with you, you'll know what to say, and you can come over as being pretty assertive. And there's a good chance that if you really are prepared to see it through, then you should be able to get your way. Now, one thing that has been happening, over the last day is that the moon has been changing sign. So you did have a moon in Cancer. That was great. Moon in Cancer. Hope you were able to take advantage of it. Moon in Cancer is, Cancer is a cardinal sign. It's a fortunate sign from a Libran perspective. But now the moon is in Leo. And the moon in Leo, likewise, it isn't such a bad place for the moon to be in if you are a Libran. With the moon in Leo, you know how to make people happy, and you come over as being a very sort of reasonable person, but also someone who's got energy, and that's especially the case in a social situation. You are radiating something, and it's not anything vague. I mean, the moon is making a square to Saturn, sorry, a trine to Saturn. And so moon trine Saturn means that you can, to an extent, control your energy. You have this natural energy that you're generating, and moon trine Saturn does allow you to sort of moderate it and perhaps focus it on perhaps particular people. And so that might be a skill that you have. Maybe it's a Libran skill. I mean, Libra is a very people-orientated sign. And, we additionally have a conjunction between the moon and Mercury. So moon-Mercury conjunction means that you can talk about most things. And if you're in any kind of social gathering, it should all be very easy for you. You'll know what to say, and you'll know that there are times when other people are feeling a bit fragile and their egos need to be boosted. Yeah, that's something you can do. If you want to flatter someone, then Libra, well, go ahead. I mean, Librans are quite good at flattery, when they want to be. They can put people at their ease. They can make people feel good about themselves. They can make people feel sort of powerful. If that's what you need to do, whatever you need to do, just do it. And so you can really sort of be in control socially, and you can do it without necessarily asserting yourself at all. You're just going to be a natural. And so it could be a very Libran day, and you can sort of move beyond your sort of strict ambitions. For sure, you've got ambitions. There are things you want, but you also know that you have to step back a bit and go through maybe the social niceties and getting people on your side. And this is something that you very much can do today. And don't forget that the sun is getting very close to Regulus, and with the sun on Regulus, that says something about perhaps the people you can meet, you have the opportunity to meet. Now, the sun conjunct Regulus might be that you have the opportunity to meet someone who is of some importance, or at least can be important to you. They might be useful. They might have contacts. So no one should be dismissed out of hand, because you never know what they're revealing, or what they could reveal. And if you give them a chance, they might be able to help you. They might be able to make a connection for you. So that's one aspect of the sun conjunct Regulus. Sun conjunct Regulus can also indicate people who are being arrogant, are rather full of themselves. That might say something about your friends, people they seem to be very confident at the moment. And is that a bad thing? It needn't be a bad thing at all. And if someone is giving off good vibes and coming over as being incredibly confident, and they believe that everything's going to work, maybe they're right. Give them a chance. See what they've got to say. Scorpio, I get the impression that things are starting to move, and that we have now the planets moving out of Cancer, into Leo, and sort of Leo is an important sign in your chart. It's at the top of your chart. It's a sign connected with success. We already have the Sun in Leo and we have Mercury in Leo, but now we've got the Moon in Leo as well. And so, Scorpio, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to achieve? And don't be afraid of coming over as being, overbearing. Sometimes it's okay to be overbearing. If you've got something important to offer, if you've got something to contribute, then don't worry. And the power of your personality is going to be obvious. And we have that Sun might be in Leo, but it's also conjunct Regulus. It's on the royal star. And so with the Sun on the royal star, this really does indicate, success for you. What is it that you're trying to do today? And I don't want to create false hope, but do give it your best shot. Not just today, but Sun is on Regulus, tomorrow as well. As you move into the end of a week, just see what you can achieve. And don't think that you're on your own. And maybe if you've got ambitions and there's something you really want to get together, maybe you'll get some help. Maybe you'll get some help from an unexpected quarter. You might be surprised that someone is actually prepared to notice you, not just notice you, but perhaps put in a good word for you. That might be one way that Sun conjunct Regulus works. But with all these planets in Leo, it does seem, Scorpio, that your ego might need a boost. You might sort of get some praise, and you normally don't associate Scorpio with wanting praise. Scorpios can see through praise, flattery. They see through it all. They know that someone is trying to manipulate you, but nonetheless, there are times when it's useful for someone to tell you that you're doing a good job. And so, if there is praise around, take it. I think that it could be helpful, and perhaps when you get praise, that allows you to judge what you're doing, and it also allows you to judge the person giving you the praise. And being a Scorpio, you're quite keen to really try to understand other people's motivations. So that is looking good. Now, if there is a warning today, you are in a strong position. You might be in a position of authority. You might be in a position to tell people what to do. Now, if you are telling people what to do, and this is especially the case if you might be tempted to sort of criticize them, then be careful. If you are in a position of authority, there's just something about the way you're exercising authority that might be misjudged. And, you might jump to a conclusion that, someone is doing something wrong, or that they're behaving in the wrong way, or whatever. And you might jump to a conclusion and make a criticism or try to correct someone, and it just might not be the right thing to do. So, don't rush to judgment today. And allow the situation to settle, because you might find what seems to be obvious, an obvious case of who's at fault, whose blame it is, might seem clear, but it's not clear at all. So don't think that you're in the right and someone else is in the wrong. Not until you've done quite a lot of research. You must be sure of yourself. But I don't think this is a big problem, and it's just something that could happen. If you see something that doesn't seem right, if you feel that someone is not behaving correctly, there just may be something else going on that right now you don't fully understand, and because, at the moment, getting the facts of a matter, may not be 100% easy. So there is a small pitfall there, but it's unnecessary. And if you can be sort of magnanimous and generous and be ready to think the best of people, even if you have private doubts, I think that might well be the best approach. Sagittarius, you are quite powerful, I think, at the moment. You're becoming increasingly powerful, and you're certainly helped by the fact that planets are now moving into Leo. There's been a sort of big sort of Cancer emphasis. Yeah, you've got Jupiter, and your Jupiter's going to be in Cancer for ages, which is a good thing. But it can be just rather too much, especially when you've got Jupiter, Venus, and the Moon in Cancer. Perhaps you're thinking too much, just getting into things too deeply, and you need some space, and you need some room, and you need to be in a position where you can start to see sort of new horizons. And with the Moon moving into Leo, this is something that can happen. It can allow you to get a new perspective, and I think a new perspective is possibly something you need, or certainly something that can be helpful. And additionally, Sagittarius, don't think that you've got all the answers. I mean, you've got a lot of the answers, but you don't know everything, and there are always new things to be discovered. And if you hear something that doesn't make sense or seems completely alien, you mustn't rush to judgment. You must hear it out, and if you're patient, you might realize that you're hearing something quite important that you can put into practice. And I would regard that as being good news. And at the same time, Sagittarius, this is a day when you can start to tune into your own power. And it's not just your power, it's everyone else's power. And perhaps you're able to align yourself with what everyone else is trying to achieve. Everyone wants something. It's really important to them, but they don't know how to get it. But you know how to get it, or you're very close to knowing how to get it. And so perhaps you can take on the power of the universe and really use it for your own interest to an extent. But you've also got to think about the wider world, and what your role is. And at the moment, Sagittarius, you are someone who is able to create change. Change can come out of nothing, and you make it happen, and all of a sudden you've got the power. So don't underestimate yourself, but at the same time you must be ready to listen. And as I've already suggested, you haven't got everything sorted out. Some people do know more than you, and under those circumstances, you should at the very least listen to what they've got to say. And in your listening, you might realize something, and you might have a sudden change. It might actually be quite a dramatic change. Suddenly something clicks, and you see that you've taken something too seriously, that you've been too single-minded, and then you just see that everything is much easier than you thought, and it's all because you were given a different view, and that different view could have come from another person. It could be someone who you take for granted. They're around all the time. You don't pay much attention to them, but or at least you don't listen to them as much as you should. But if you do listen to them, then there are some real gains there. Capricorn, you're very aware of how much control you have. Now, that doesn't mean that you're throwing your weight around, or you're insisting that everyone takes you seriously. You just know that whatever you're doing with your life, you're the one in control. If you don't want to do something, well, you just don't have to do it. It really is as simple as that. So Capricorn, in that sense, I think that it can be, quite a good day, because no one's going to mess with you, and you're not going to have to really fight for anything. So whatever it is that you feel is important, then just go ahead with it, and you have a chance to really think about what it is that is important to you. You're a Capricorn. Capricorn has a reputation for being quite serious, and I think today that seriousness is obvious. I think that people pick up on it, and because they pick up on it, they don't bother you. They just know that you've decided on something, and that there's not going to be any real sort of contradictions going on here. You want to do it, then where is the resistance going to come from? Well, the resistance could come from your imagination. You might decide that there are things holding you back, not real things, but just things that you have decided are important, but they're not important. What matters is you, and you don't have to apologize. And it's not though a situation where you have to think about it's you and them. Other people are perhaps are a threat, or you're in a situation where you just don't interact with other people. They don't interact with you. It's not quite like that, because Venus is still making a conjunction to Jupiter. Venus is in Cancer, your opposite sign. Jupiter is, of course, going to be in Cancer for a long time, but Venus is in Cancer until Monday, and with Venus in Cancer for the rest of the week, you still are able to come over as a reasonably friendly, reasonably sociable person, but it's just that at the moment your boundaries are very clear, and as I've already said, I think that those boundaries are going to be respected, and it may just be as simple as that. Though as far as your own power is concerned, if you want to, you really can be powerful. You can make it clear who you are, and people will listen to you. And if you feel that it's important to get attention, then definitely you can get attention. And if you want something, your willpower right now is going to be really strong. And so if you've absolutely 100% made up your mind that you want it, and but you must get it, then there's really a very good chance that you will get it. But it's your strength of will that matters. But you have to be absolutely sure about it, because the thing about willpower is that it can't be sort of half-hearted. You can't have any sort of uncertainty about it. Well, maybe there is an alternative option. Maybe you don't have to have it. No, it's got to be an 100% decision that you must have it. And if you can reach that level of being 100% sure, then I think there's just a good chance that everything around you will just configure, and you will get whatever it is that you want, because as I've said, you are a pretty serious person at the moment. Though the moon does make a trine to Mercury, makes a trine to Saturn, and it does make a conjunction to Mercury, and those aspects potentially have social implications, and it could be about you being able to get through to another person. If you feel you need to get through to someone, then you can, and you don't have to say anything. I don't think it's just through the way you are, people picking up on what you want. It's all very obvious, and so if there's something you want from another person, then you don't necessarily have to ask them directly. Somehow everything will just work in such a way that they do end up giving you what you want. Aquarius, you're very aware of the balance between yourself and others. This is because, we've got, 3 planets in Leo. You've got Moon in Leo, Mercury in Leo, Sun in Leo. Leo is, of course, your opposite sign. And so you can see the activity, and you can also see the influence that certain people can have on you. And, it would be nice if you could just do whatever you wanted, without feeling any sort of guilt or responsibility. But there is pressure, and it may just be sort of moral pressure, and it may be pressure that's not being exerted by anyone else. It just may be you exerting pressure on yourself, you feeling that you maybe have to pay attention to another person, and that you have to give up some of your time for them, and you just don't want it to sort of get out of hand. You do value your own privacy and your own rights, and you've got your own plans, and you don't want to find that they're just completely disrupted by what other people are doing. And so try to consider what is going on and what the nature of any pressure actually is. And there is this possibility of exaggeration. You take something just too seriously, and this does raise a question about where exactly should the balance be. I think it is important, Aquarius, that you do understand what people are doing, and also that you are aware of the relative balance of power. Who does have the power? And it's nice, Aquarius, for you to have the power, and that might be something that you want with Pluto moving through Aquarius. I know it moved into Aquarius quite a long time ago, but you're still getting used to it. And at the moment, we've got the Sun in late Leo, and so the Sun is a planet that, of course, does represent other people, and the Sun, is still in Leo, very strong in Leo, and it's moving through the last degrees of Leo. And in the last degrees of Leo, it is in the term, at least using the Egyptian terms, and also the face of Mars. So these are sort of minor dignities that astrologers sometimes use. So there's a real Mars feeling to the Sun, and so that might say something about another person, someone who does want attention, who can be quite demanding, and who is also strongly placed. And so, what do you do? Well, I don't think this is the kind of person you should ignore. Just because someone is assertive and is full of energy doesn't mean to say that they need be harmful. It's just a question of managing them and giving someone some of your time, but not necessarily all of your time, and also remembering that you yourself are not powerless. If you want to assert yourself, if you want to demonstrate what you can do, then you certainly can. And also, Aquarius, if you want to create change, then that shouldn't be so difficult. If it's important to you, though, you don't want to create change for the sake of it. You don't want to have a revolution for just out of curiosity, or just to assert yourself. Why not? And just show that you're around, that you're still kicking. You don't want unnecessary revolutions. But if you feel that a revolution is necessary, then Aquarius, there's a good chance that you can certainly do something. You can get noticed, and if something really, really needs to be changed, then I think that you can do it. But as far as other people are concerned, don't underestimate another person's capacity to explain. There is a conjunction between the Moon and Mercury. I think it's overall a pretty fortunate conjunction between the Moon and Mercury, and it's in Leo, in your opposite sign. And so that might be about someone who is able to explain. And so if you don't understand what someone is doing or why someone wants whatever it is that they want, well, why don't you just ask them? And if you ask someone a question today, I think it's very likely that you're going to get quite a comprehensive reply. Doesn't mean to say that you have to agree with what you hear, but at least you'll understand another person's perspective and their motivations, and surely that has got to be a good thing. And as far as close relationships are concerned, I've just said that the Sun is conjunct Regulus. The Sun is in a really quite strong position, and maybe you should respect the strength of, for example, your partner or a spouse at the moment, and it may be a strength that is a good thing. And you don't always want to be the one making decisions, and if someone is feeling strongly about something and has the power to see it through, maybe it is all for the best. Pisces. Things are changing. I was very positive yesterday when I was looking at your horoscope. I was mentioning the fact that we had Moon and Venus and Jupiter in Cancer, and the Moon was conjunct Venus in Cancer, and things look good. Things are still good. You've still got Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. They're 10 degrees apart, but that's close enough for them to have a sort of a conjunction feel to them. Okay, it's not a very close conjunction. In fact, it's a very wide conjunction. But these are fortunate planets in a fortunate part of your horoscope, and so there's no reason why you can't have a very useful and perhaps even amusing Thursday. Amusing. I think you can go further for an amusement. I think you can do something that is of great importance, that you feel good about it, you feel powerful about it, but the Moon is out of Cancer, and with the Moon out of Cancer, you may have to adopt a slightly different approach. Perhaps over the last couple of days you've been rather happy-go-lucky, and you've been able to sort of enjoy what was going on, and not have to struggle too much. But with the Moon moving out of Cancer, you're starting to think about what do you need to do to see something through. Is it going to look after itself? Well, probably not. And if you want something to really blossom and to become an important and valuable part of your life, well, you're going to have to look after it. You're going to have to nurture it. And the Moon moving into Leo, Leo is a sign that's not completely compatible with Pisces. So whenever the Moon is in Leo, Pisceans can feel that they don't quite know what's going on. They might feel uneasy about something, and what you might be uneasy about is just having to address yourself to certain details. Perhaps you're enjoying doing something which you shouldn't have to worry about details. You shouldn't have to worry about grounding it. It just should be natural and spontaneous. But even things that are natural and spontaneous do need to be grounded, because otherwise it's just a load of hot air. You might have moments of pleasure, but it could all just disappear. So if you want something to stay with you, then you might have to put some work in. I mean, and it's okay. This is definitely something you can do, and also don't be satisfied with things. Don't be satisfied with things, especially if you feel that they're sort of some of the way there, but not all of the way there. If that's the case, then you ask yourself, what do you need to do to see that final change, to really finish the revolution? And it can be done. It can be done. Perhaps at some level you can't be bothered, but if you put the effort in, you can make something very real, something that at first started off as a bit of a fantasy, but you can really bring it down to earth, and just make it a part of your your everyday life. And in terms of whatever you're trying to do, if you make the effort and if you make it clear to everyone that something is important to you, then I think in most cases you're going to get the assistance that you need. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And so it's now time to look at today, Thursday, from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 34, which is the power of the great. Now, the power of the great does really indicate that potentially we do have a lot of power. Perhaps a massive amount of power. That might be the way it feels. Of course, none of us have got all the power in the world, and perhaps we've had power over the last few days or weeks, and perhaps its power has been building up. And the question is, what do we do with it? And it might seem very lots of things that we can do, and to begin with, with the power of the great, I think that we can really make good progress, and we can we see evidence that our power is actually sort of manifesting, in the real world. And perhaps in the past we'd felt that things just weren't moving; they were a bit stuck. But now things are happening, and so, in the first instance, it looks good, and there's a lot to be optimistic about. But there is a problem, and the problem is that in this hexagram, the third line moves. So if you look at this hexagram, we have, obviously, in the I Ching, a hexagram is divided up into two trigrams. So you've got a bottom trigram and a top trigram. And so, when the third line moves, you're trying to make the transition from the bottom trigram to the top trigram. And that transition is often difficult. And this third line moving is no exception. And the question is, how do we use our power? Well, yeah, we've got power, but what do we do with it? And it depends what kind of person we are. And the I Ching distinguishes between the strong person and the weak person. What does the weak person do? Well, the weak person has their power, and they try to use their power. They try to make maximum use of this. They perhaps are rather arrogant about it, entitled. They think that they can make things happen, and they can make that transition from the bottom trigram to the top. But the strong person realizes that it's a difficult situation. They know they've got the power, but they decide to hold back. And that is the right thing to do. And so the overall message here is, with the power of a great, yes, in theory, you might have the ability to do something, but should you actually use this energy? Should you really try and go for it? And the I Ching is warning you against it. It's saying that if you do try, then you might get stuck, and you might not actually be able to make that transition between the bottom trigram and the top trigram. And we have two moving lines here. The second line from the bottom moves, and the third line. So that means that the power of the great transforms itself to hexagram number 51, which is thunderbolts. And perhaps what this is saying, thunderbolts, it is about a dramatic event. It's a hexagram that we've had pretty recently, and so we prepare ourselves for dramatic events, and perhaps that's why we don't push it. I've just said that the strong person doesn't use their power. They don't throw their power around because they know it could backfire. The weak person just does what they like. They're arrogant. They're boastful. they try to use whatever small amounts of power they have, and it just doesn't go anywhere, and it backfires. And perhaps they should have waited. And what they should have waited for is hexagram 51, which is a power which does not come from the individual. It comes from somewhere else. So this is perhaps the power of the universe. It's an outside force, and this outside force makes itself clear, and it is thunderbolts, and it feels really dramatic. It feels really threatening. It feels that it's going to overthrow everything. Of course, it's not. If we just keep our cool and we restrain ourselves and we don't try and fight back, and we just let this thing flow and let the thunderbolts do their work, we'll still be left standing, and we don't have to resist. And in fact, this might work to our advantage. And the I Ching talks about the way this whole thing works through. But to begin with, there is panic, because this seems completely disastrous. So that might be something you might find yourself getting into. But then if you just keep your cool, the panic dissolves into the laughter of relief. It's just not so bad. And whatever it is we're trying to do, we can continue doing it. There's going to be no interruption. So the important thing is not to panic. And in fact, the power of the thunderbolts may be the power that moves us forward. We talk about the power of the great, the previous hexagram. This was everything we were trying to achieve. Maybe we should not try to achieve things on our own. We should have tried to achieve things with the help of the universe, and we should wait for the universe to manifest and to show us the path forward. And it might be a bit of a shock when we see what the universe is telling us, but it's a shock that we can certainly deal with. And I want to finish with the meeting on Monday between Trump and the European leaders. And I didn't really follow this story too carefully. I mean, I did do a video on Trump going to Trump meeting Putin in Alaska. So for the sake of balance, we should look at Trump meeting Zelensky and the other European leaders. So it seems that what happened is Zelensky went to Washington to meet Trump, but he needed to get some support, and so he got quite a lot of support. He managed to get together 5 European leaders, which was Keir Starmer from the UK, Emmanuel Macron from France, Friedrich Merz from Germany, Giorgia Meloni and from Italy, and the Finnish, I think he's the Finnish president, Alexander Stubb. So there were 5 of them, plus you had Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, and of course Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. So there's a lot of them went with Zelensky to provide some support. And I think that looking at the sort of mainstream press, they sort of seem to be happy about it, but there is a view that really the Europe completely humiliated itself. We had sort of Zelensky saying, he was going to buy $100 billion of weapons from America, almost like a bribe. And who was going to come up with $100 billion? Well, Europe was going to come up with the money. So it's nice that Zelensky can spend other people's money. And so, as far as the meeting itself was concerned, let's look at the chart. So here is the chart. This is the chart for when Trump sort of introduced the leaders of or of the countries, not his meeting with Zelensky, because I think this happened earlier. And so here is the meeting that Trump had. I believe it was at 2:15 p.m. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I got that right, when he welcomed the European leaders, we had Uranus on the 7th house cusp. That's not a very good omen, is it? I mean, Uranus on the 7th, that's quite a sort of martial combination. It suggests war, doesn't it? I mean, to me, it might suggest war. It's not great. surprises from outside, and additionally, the moon is void of course. I mean, it's not. It's almost in Cancer, but not quite. I mean, it's at 2951 Gemini, so the moon was sort of getting ready to move into Cancer, but it wasn't quite there. I mean, there is a view though that if a moon is really, really late in the sign, it's certainly in horary astrology that you don't necessarily regard it as being void of course. If it's really right at the end, that it's just a situation which is like about to change. So there are different ways of looking at it. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a horrific chart. I mean, the South Node is South Node on the midheaven. I don't like that. I mean, the South Node is kind of quite reputational, and you're thinking about the lasting impression that this leaves. Is this good for Europe's reputation? I mean, probably not. I mean, I think that people have said that Europe was really sort of humiliating themselves by having to go to the court of King Donald, and so that is a view. Also, the moon is in the 8th house. The moon it's quite sort of deathly moving into the 8th. It is about death. I mean, we're talking about war. People are dying, and it's also unfortunate. But I don't want to say just on the basis of this chart that it's all going to be a disaster or the meeting won't mean anything. I mean, I'm not going to go that far. But and also the moon, you could say the moon is sort of sextile the sun. If you're trying to have a meeting, having the moon sextile the sun, is good, because the moon sextile sun is, it's quite sort of a harmonious combination. It would have been better though if they'd had the meeting 6 hours earlier, maybe at 5 in the morning, when the moon was applying to the sextile of the sun, rather than being right at the end of Gemini, going nowhere. And you could say, but the moon is going into Cancer. That is a fortunate place for the moon. Yeah, but the moon in Cancer, when it moves into Cancer, it straight away makes a square to Saturn, so that's not good. And so that might say something about how the meeting turns out in the end. Perhaps it wasn't fully apparent when the meeting took place, but the moon in the end made a square to Saturn. So what I wanted to do in this video is to suggest a technique which I don't know how widely used this technique is, but it's just a theory. I mean, and I am not even saying it works, but you have 7 people going, 7 politicians. I mean, 5 prime ministers, presidents, and then you got the sort of head of NATO, head of the European Union, General Secretary of NATO, President of European Commission. So you've got these 7 people. So we can treat all of these 7 people as individuals, but what if we wanted to treat them as a collective, just as a group? Now, what we could do is we could do a collective composite. Now, in order to do that, you would take each of their sons. Macron's got his son in late Sagittarius. Ursula, she's got her son in I think she's a Libra, isn't she? And so Starmer's a Virgo. So you take all of their sons, you convert them into absolute longitude, you add them all up, and then you divide by 7, and then you get a composite sun for the 7. And then you can do that for all the planets. Now, that's not what I did. What I did instead was I took their dates of birth, and I didn't use an astrology program for this. I mean, I didn't really look at times of birth. I mean, I don't have the time of birth for all of the 7. And I took all of their dates of birth, and I simply asked for an average. I just asked for the mean. And this would be using effectively the Davidson's time-space technique. So when you've got synastry between two people, when you're trying to work out a composite chart between two, he would take the midpoint of the two people's dates, the midpoint of their longitude and the midpoint of their latitude, and as an alternative to a composite. And it has a sort of more, it's a real chart, and it has a certain logic to it. So this is really what I'm doing. So I'm just taking the average of all of their birth dates. Of course, I don't have an ascendant, so there's no point looking at the ascendant. And so we get a chart. You've got some people. The oldest I think is Metz, who was born in 55, or is it Ursula? I think it's Metz who's born in 55, and then the youngest, I think the youngest is Macron. And so you take the average, and you come up with this chart here. This, again, forget the angles. This is the chart of those 7 people, and I come up with October the 23rd, 1966. And so, at some level, the positions of the planets on October the 23rd, 1966, tell us something about the energy of that delegation of those 7 people. Now, I'm not including Trump, and I'm not including Zelensky. So I could, in theory, have thrown in the dates of Zelensky and Trump to do that, and if I'd thrown in that, of course, it would have been a bit earlier. But they were slightly different. So I was just focusing on the European side of things, and so we get this chart, and it's a chart that sorry, why is my alarm gone? Sorry about that. We get this chart, which is, it's October 23rd, 1966. And so, what was going on then? Well, we had those oppositions going on in 66. We had, look at Saturn opposition Uranus. And we had Chiron opposition Uranus. And Chiron exactly opposition Uranus. So, these are sort of outer planets. And so perhaps this group of people, they reflect the tensions going on in the mid-1960s. And so, with Saturn opposition Uranus, we've talked about Saturn-Uranus already. And Saturn-Uranus is a cycle which is very much connected with Russia and the Soviet Union before it, and so Saturn and Uranus is having to deal with Russia. This is perhaps what it's saying, and that strikes me as being a main theme of this chart. Oh, well, I'm not saying this chart works. I'm just playing here I'm just playing with astrology. See what we can find. And additionally, we have Mercury conjunct Neptune in Scorpio. One wonders with Mercury conjunct Neptune in Scorpio whether these people have a clue what they're doing. Do they really know what they're getting into? Or are they just trying to be deceptive? Are they just trying to wrap Trump up with their narrative, using clever words to try to persuade him to keep on supporting the war, and of course to keep on supporting Zelensky? And so I think it's an interesting chart. And also we've got it seems to be Sun in Libra here. I make that 29-35 Libra, so I would have said on balance it's going to have Sun in Libra rather than Sun in Scorpio, as we are looking at quite a few averages. I think probably it's going to be Sun in Libra. It may be wrong. So Sun in Libra, Venus in Libra. So Libra is very much part of how it's trying to show itself to be the collective, trying to be this group of people, trying to be very reasonable. And we should stop thinking about these people as individuals. Absolutely not. I've said this before. When you're dealing with the war in Ukraine, you're dealing with collective processes. You really are. Ordinary people can make decisions, but once you become West European leader, you've lost your individuality. You're not a real person. You are just an instrument of the collective. So So forget all these ideas about individuals. I mean, I'd say the same with Putin. I think that Putin is an instrument of the collective. I'm not just restricting my views to European leaders, and that is the price you pay when you become a leader, a senior politician. You just you lose your individuality, you lose your control. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The more power you have, the less power you have, and so. Still, with the sun in Libra, it's they're trying their best to be reasonable, to be very human, be very airy. You've got Moon in Aquarius, trying to talk reason to Trump, reason as they see it, and so that Moon in Aquarius is kind of interesting, that they are. They're going to Washington to meet Trump. They're going to the United States, and they are incredibly supportive of Ukraine. At least that's what they say. One wonders whether these people really care about the amount of people getting killed in this war on both the Russian and Ukrainian side. It's more about the principle, about what they feel is important to them. I mean, I think I really do need to do a separate video about this, but I haven't got it together. And this moon in this moon in Aquarius does kind of represent the bridge between the United States and the Ukraine, because if we look at the United States chart, the United States' chart is at 27 Aquarius. So the collective, these 7 European leaders, they have their collective moon at about 24 Aquarius. I mean, reality is it's not going to, because a lot of these charts I don't have a time. Well, I wasn't taking into account times of birth. So the moon is going to be probably somewhere in late Aquarius. It's almost certainly going to be in Aquarius, and so the United States has its moon in Aquarius. So there's a sort of a link there with the United States, and this is a one-off delegation. The next time the Europeans send a delegation, they might send a different group of people. Will they always send Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland? And then you look at the chart of Ukraine, and Ukraine, remember, the United States has its moon at 27 Aquarius, and Ukraine has its moon at 22 Aquarius. So you can see that this delegation, the collective delegation, has its moon in Aquarius. So they're really linked up with both the United States and Ukraine. And then you might ask, what is going on? What was going on? What kind of transits did we have at the time of this meeting? Well, there are a couple of interesting link-ups. So if we look at the transits that this delegation had, so we were just discussing how the sun, or rather the collective sun, is in Libra. It's right at the end of Libra at 29:35. So the delegation of these 7 people has their sun in Libra, and the moon was at 29 degrees Gemini when they met with Trump. So the moon was exactly trine the sun, which I would have said was a pretty good sign. They were probably feeling great that they were there, they were in the White House, things were running very smoothly. So I think that is certainly an important link between the two charts. And at the same time, there was they have a Sun Venus conjunction. So the delegation, the collective, has Sun Venus conjunction, and Chiron was on the opposition to Sun-Venus midpoint. So that Chiron kind of represents the principle of sort of rejection, a wound. There is a way in which these people are trying to heal a wound, and Chiron is there, and there is with that transit just feeling sort of isolated and not really connected with it. And Saturn is about something. Sorry, Chiron is about something that it does have an essential sadness and rejection to it, but they're doing their best. They're trying to keep a brave face, and regardless of the adverse situation, they're trying to they're pushing their way forward. They're trying to make their presence felt, and this is Chiron behavior. Chiron does want to be noticed, and you have to think about Chiron as the maverick. So there is something rather weird about these 7 European leaders going to Washington, and maybe the Chiron does represent some of that weirdness. And so those are a few thoughts about the transits. I didn't think that there was anything sort of earth-shattering about the transits, but perhaps that the transiting moon making the trine to the sun perhaps validates the chart. And then what is this delegation all about? Why were these 7 people brought together? Well, they were there to look after Zelensky, to make sure he behaved himself, and to make sure Trump treated him nicely. And so what about the link between them and Zelensky? So here we've got Zelensky in the middle, and on the outer wheel we've got the delegation. And so the delegation had its Jupiter at 3 degrees 9 Leo, and fairly close to Zelensky's Mars. And we shouldn't forget that Zelensky is the head of state of Ukraine, and so Zelensky is the king. And so what goes with Zelensky goes with the land he rules, and so he is the head of state. And so their Jupiter on his Mars, they are helping him continue with the fight. That's what Mars is about. Mars is about warfare, armies, weapons. Jupiter is on their Mars, and they're trying to make sure he gets the stuff he needs. And their Jupiter, their collective Jupiter, and it's not composite. It's because it's using a time-space chart effectively. Their Jupiter is also opposition his Sun and his Venus. So they're really trying to push him to, make the most of the situation, to get Trump's support, to carry on with the war. I mean, that's what they want, isn't it? And so I think that is certainly an interesting link, perhaps an important link, and it's quite distressing as well, because the Europeans, I think there seems to be little doubt that they want the war to continue. And Zelensky has his ascendant at 21 Gemini, and the collective has its Saturn at 23 Pisces. It's got this Saturn-Uranus opposition, because remember, October 23rd, 1966, there was a Saturn-Uranus opposition, and it makes a square to Zelensky's ascendant. So it's really stirring up Zelensky. But because Zelensky is the president of a country, you could say that it's also stirring up Ukraine. It's what is it doing to Ukraine, and what it's encouraging Ukraine, to take things further, to go as far as it can. And they're also doing the same thing, with Trump. And with Zelensky and Trump, what an important piece of synastry between Zelensky and Trump is the fact that here is Zelensky's ascendant. Now Trump's sun is on Zelensky's ascendant, and his moon is on Zelensky's descendant. And I think this is an important piece of synastry that we may need to talk about. And so, if we look at the synastry between Trump and Zelensky, hold on. So here's Trump's chart, and we do the Trump-Zelensky synastry. So there's Zelensky's ascendant. There's Trump's sun, right on Zelensky's ascendant. You could say that's quite a powerful connection. But then Trump's moon in Sagittarius is on his descendant, and so Trump was born on a full moon. That full moon is across Zelensky's ascendant. So I think that part of that is the confusion Zelensky feels by the fact that Trump is not just talking to him, but he's also talking to his enemies. He's also talking to Putin. I think in the middle of this meeting, he made a phone call with Putin. So that was quite disconcerting for him. And so I think that you can see the problem with that. And then when you take the chart of Trump and Zelensky, you then have to remember that the delegation, the time-space chart of the mean chart of these 7 politicians has a Saturn-Uranus opposition, and that Saturn-Uranus opposition is square Trump's ascendant, and it's square Zelensky's ascendant and his descendant, and it's square Trump's sun, square Trump's moon. And so you could say that the Saturn-Uranus opposition in the delegation chart, which was around on October 23rd, 1966. It may have been a long time ago, nearly 50 years ago. Was it 60? Oh, I'm getting it's nearly 60 years ago. It's still around. It's still manifesting. And these 7 people from Europe have brought that Saturn-Uranus opposition, which was around in the mid-60s, and they're using it to spread chaos, to continue the war. And you're seeing the drama of that Saturn-Uranus. It continues, and because that's what they're trying to do, isn't it? They're trying to keep this war going for as long as possible, and just hoping that there's just some way of defeating Russia. So those are a few thoughts about the meeting. I'm not saying that this method of combining 7 people's charts is it realistic? I don't know, but I think we see a bit of evidence that it might work. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.